as Ira said, my name is David, and I'm so sorry that this is in English, but you'd be much sorrier if I were trying to do this in Hebrew. So I hope that Ira didn't jinx it too much, saying that the talk last year was really interesting. Hopefully we can do the same thing. But so I'm going to talk to you guys about something a little different. I know that everybody who comes in here shares some experiences, but usually the experiences are closer to your area of expertise. Designers, journalists, other teachers, etc. And I'm coming from a completely different area. I'm coming from the world of high tech. But there's a lot of overlap, and there's hopefully a lot of lessons from this that you guys will be able to take on into what you all will be doing. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about how startups don't just happen. And we're also going to talk about the similarities between all of you and what you may do after you leave HIT and try to start your own business or do something. We're going to talk about, of all things, the mobile internet and how it is completely changing the way that people engage and interact with brands and with companies and with just everything. And then we're going to talk about how you, in fact, are all brands. Kolbusada? So, okay. So who am I? So as Ira said, I worked in San Francisco for a number of years in Silicon Valley. I worked at Macromedia and then Adobe for 8 exceptionally long years on Flash. So all of you who remember Flash banner ads, I'm so sorry. Skip intros, the rest of it. Oh, now I can hear myself. I'm also a failed entrepreneur and very proud of that. Started a number of startups, none of them amounted to anything. Worked for a couple startups, none of them amounted to anything, but failure is just part of the game. Today I work for Wix. I'm sure some of you are familiar or have friends who, I was actually warned about a couple people in here who have friends at Wix that I should watch out for them. So today I work in what's called developer experience. That means that I help shape the experience that developers have working on our platform. It's like UX, but instead of users, we target developers. So, I don't know if, and one small note here is that the thing on the left here, this is what I grew up in. It's a fun little fact. My parents were very inspired by Buckminster Fuller and the futurist architecture and decided that they should build a dome in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. So if that doesn't explain where I came from, then really nothing else does. So what we're going to talk about is building a startup. And what's interesting about building startups is that they don't just happen. Startups don't just appear. It's not like all of a sudden Facebook was a thing or Instagram was a thing or Wix was a thing. They all have very specific origin stories. They all started from something, pivoted, changed ideas a number of times and turned into something else that may or may not have succeeded and most likely didn't succeed. But really, a startup is any group of people or person that has an idea, that has some kind of funding and is trying to do something. A lot of startups started in garages because they couldn't afford office space. In the same way that a designer might take a small studio in Yafo trying to turn it into something. It's the same. We really shouldn't look at them as anything different. Just startups have basically monopolized on this idea that if you're an entrepreneur with an idea, you're a startup. So I don't know if anyone has noticed, but Tel Aviv is full of startups. I'm sure a lot of you have friends who are working in startups who went right from the army to startups. Tel Aviv is actually one of the single largest collections of startups anywhere in the world. There's over 1,000 startups in Tel Aviv alone. And what's amazing is there's so much money here. So much money. It's staggering to think about. $3 billion, are invested into startups in Tel Aviv. 3 billion. It's insane, mind-boggling amounts of money. And what's also even crazier about that is that most of them are going to fail. Most of that money is just going to disappear. Investors will never get their money back, and it's just gone. Almost everyone will fail. And knowing this, you have to start asking yourself, I have an idea, I have something. I know I'm probably going to fail. Most likely going to fail. You have to go into startups knowing that you're going to fail, just like you go into any business thinking most likely you're going to fail. And you have to kind of start from there. And usually entrepreneurs, they're people that are made. They're not born. You don't come out of the womb thinking, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to be Steve Jobs. You grow into it. It's something that you learn. It's something that you hone, basically. And just because you have an idea does not mean you have business sense. There's so many amazing, brilliant people with great ideas who don't know how to market it, who don't know how to turn it into something bigger than what they're thinking. And because of this, and because there is so much money, helping startups is actually a giant business. It's huge. Conferences, lectures, people make millions selling books to other people who want to start a startup about how to do it. How do I turn this idea into something? And that's what we're going to start talking about here, is we're going to start talking about one of the methodologies that exist in startups today to help them go from this idea to product. And some of this will be relevant to design, to interior design, to graphics, to what you all are doing, but I always think it's interesting to kind of get a perspective from what other people are doing and what other industries do. So one of the largest ideas, kind of, the one that has the most mind share right now, is this idea of the lean startup. And the lean startup is the least sexy thing. I mean, startups aren't, startup methodology, it's the lead here that's not sexy, and then this idea is even less sexy. So this idea that you build, you learn from what you've built, and then if necessary, you change your mind, you pivot, you do something different. And the entire movement is from this one guy, Eric Rice. And as he basically says, startup success can be engineered. So it's less about luck and more about taking all of these constraints that you can control, repackaging them, and then succeeding from these. So the first thing you learn is that it's not so much about working really, really hard. It's not about working 80 or 100 hours a week. It's about being smarter about what you're actually doing. And it's less about, can I build it? Who cares if you can build it? Anybody can build something. Should I build it? That's also not a question. It's, can I build a business around it? If I take all of this time, if I take all of this money, will it actually turn into something that amounts to something? Will it turn into something that I can form a business around? Can I make money doing this? Right? You don't want to spend all of your time working and working and working only to realize that there's no market, there's no business, I've just wasted years, now I have to go get a boring office job. Well, in startups, they're all boring office jobs. So the lean methodology, the way you go about this, basically says that you want to determine what the problem is. You want to think about it. What's the problem? What does the market need? What do I want to solve? Get Taxi is a great example. Get Taxi, it's a pain in the ass to wait for a taxi. So you have Get. You log in, you say, I want a taxi here, and the taxi comes. Problem solved, right? You build what's called an MVP. And an MVP is the minimum viable product. This is the smallest set of product requirements or product features that will actually turn into something that you think people will want, or that they will be interested in. And then literally you measure all the things. You measure everything. So let's think about an MVP. Let's take Instagram. Instagram is huge. It was bought by Facebook for $1 billion. It's actually starting to become more popular than Facebook in a number of markets. And what was their version 1? Their version 1 was very, very simple. Take a photo, apply a filter, share it with your followers, follow people, and share it to social networks, share on Facebook and Twitter. And that recipe is very small. It's not very advanced. I mean, you can list it literally in 5 bullet points. That recipe was enough that eventually they were bought out for $1 billion. It got them enough market share, it got them enough mind share that people would be interested in it. But it's not just enough to say, here's my first product. Part of the MVP is saying, here's my product, here's something I'm going to release, and then I'm going to try it, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to do more from this and see what I can do. And in this case, you take the product features and you increment them. You make small, tiny little changes, and you throw that out into the wild. And it's easier in software, right? Because you can throw something out in 3 seconds and people will download a new version and use it. But you always check your assumptions. You try something, if it doesn't work, you try it again. You try something different. But to do all of these things, it takes a lot of art. So for Instagram version 1.5, and this is the version that was actually the #1 on the Apple Store for a very long time. All they did, it was very simple. From 1.0 to 1.5, they improved the newsfeed. They added more features in terms of filters. They added German, Spanish, Russian, a couple of the languages. And then they added share by email. That was it. That was the entire difference. That was 6 months of work between 1 and 1.5 for this, for these 4 things. And it's amazing how different this cycle is. When I was at Adobe, our product releases were 2.5 years. So we'd have an idea, we would plan it. It's like launching the space shuttle. And 2.5 years later, hopefully the market was still interested, or the market that we had predicted would exist 2.5 years later would like what we were doing. Today at Wix, we release something every minute, basically, and measure and see what happens. And to measure, we use something called A/B testing. And A/B testing is about as simple as it sounds. It's literally, do I like A or do I like B? And that's it. And it sounds really simplistic, and it is, but A/B testing is actually how most of the major decisions in startups and software companies are made. And it can be everything from, do I like the color red versus blue on this page, or is this feature better than this other feature? And what it does is it helps you eliminate uncertainty. Because everything about lean startup and building startups is about turning something that should be creative and interesting and turning it into engineering, turning it into just this hard science, where you basically take it and you say, listen, product development, it's not what my gut says. It's not that I think everybody needs photo filters. It's that I've actually measured and I've checked. And I've seen that every version that we release that has filters, people like more. And it could be even 1% more. And really what it tells you is that products should not be built in isolation. The days of one genius working in a small shed somewhere and then coming into the world 3 years later with a new product that manages to completely blow the market away, that time is basically dead. The market moves so fast and consumer taste is so fickle that you have to constantly measure and constantly respond to it. So to give you an actual real-world example from this, we had 2 landing pages at Wix. This is, you go to wix.com and this is what you see. And the question was, do you like the top or the bottom more? And why should this care? Why should this matter? Right? Why do we care that the guy with the bike is better than the guy cooking? Because there's a Start Now button. And if we can get even 0.5%, even just this small number of people to click Start Now, that means at the end of the day, we might actually end up with a customer. And a 0.5% change might mean thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of users. In our case, we have 65 million users at this point. So even a small percent makes a big difference. Out of curiosity, top or bottom? See, everybody's pretty split. And what ended up happening, and I'll go back. We're not going to look at this too long because it's exceptionally boring. What ended up happening is the top was actually better. And the top is actually a local bike manufacturer. They make custom single speeds. Gordon Bennett, they're fantastic. So we measured that. We measured the picture on the homepage. And then we measured it for the English market. We measured it for the Spanish market. We measured it for the Russian market. And we literally take every tiny thing and turn it into a science. Not a single feature that we release at Wix anymore goes out without thinking about the A/B test, without thinking about how we're going to measure whether or not it's successful versus something else. And a lot of times it's not successful. Yes, sir. Statistics, we literally, with A/B testing, not to get too technical, but what we will do is half of the people will see the guy with the bike, half of the people will see, mostly random. It's a controlled study. So we know how many people are viewing it. And at the end of the day, after a couple weeks, we know exactly how many people have seen A, how many people have seen B, and then we know what they did after they saw A or B. You know, a simple example is you want to add something to a shopping cart. Once that item is added to a shopping cart, you want to make sure that that item is purchased by the person. It's called going through a funnel. The funnel is very wide, and the end of the funnel is somebody buying something. And things as simple as the color of the button to say checkout, if it's something that blends in too much with the rest of the UI, if it's too glaring, all things that will turn people off. And you know, when that's your business, these tiny little things matter just so much. But a lot of times things fail. I've worked on a number of products that never saw the light of day. Why? Because people didn't like them. And it's not, some of it is our fault, but some of it is that the market is fickle. You cannot predict what people are going to like. There's just no way to do it. And part of this idea of the lean startup is that you have to know when to quit. You have to realize that what you're doing is not interesting. It's not good. People don't care. And you move on. You do something different. There's this certain idea that, you know, everyone else is wrong and you're right, and this idea is so good that you're going to power through. The reality is that almost never happens. And occasionally, you know, the stories that we hear of somebody persevering and having this great idea that they push through the market once a generation, once in industry. Usually what happens is market forces dictate that something's not interesting, and then it dies, it goes away. But that doesn't mean anything in startup world. In startup world, that just means that your idea was good, but not good enough. And then you do something else. At the end of the day, this entire idea of taking other people's money and building a product out of it is that you have to control, and if you remember nothing else from what I'm going to tell you today, remember this more than anything else. There's so many things you cannot control. You can't control taste. You can't control market forces. You can't control, in the case of Adobe, which we'll talk about soon, that Steve Jobs decides that he's going to kill Flash, that he's going to say that Flash shouldn't exist on iPhones. You can't control that. You have to hold on to the few things that you can control and really control them and really own them and make sure that for those things, you can do everything you want with them. Because at the end of the day, you're going to fail. You're most likely going to fail. And I'm not saying this like it's a bad thing and that no one should try, but failure is just part of the game. You're going to fail, but you don't want to fail because you didn't do something that was in your control, that you could actually affect. One of the biggest critiques of this idea of the lean startup and the idea of A/B testing and the idea of measuring everything is that innovation doesn't happen anymore. No one innovates. Basically, everyone measures and checks and measures and checks, and they give the market just what the market wants and nothing else. There's a famous quote from Henry Ford. Basically, I'm sure you guys have heard this, that if I gave the people what I wanted, you know, I'd just give them a faster horse. And that's very equivalent here. And you have to ask yourself, with A/B testing, with quick release cycles, with the market being as fickle as it is today, could the iPhone happen? You know, would I be here controlling the presentation on my phone? It's hard to say. If Steve Jobs and the rest of Apple had decided to measure every little thing, would they have been successful? And as someone who is inside the industry, but someone who also watches, part of my job is to watch market trends and see where the innovation is. It's a very valid critique. It's something that in the industry, who really innovates anymore? Who really comes out with a product that you say, oh my God, this is amazing? It almost never happens. You'll say, oh, this is cool, right? Like there's another iPhone. Oh, that's nice. There's a Google Glass. I don't know if anyone saw that. It was a disaster. Everyone hated it because there's this great term. People started using glass holes. You know, you had this stupid thing on your face that was recording potentially recording everything that people were doing around you. And it pissed everyone off, and it basically died. You know, we know we're at a point where, you know, okay, we can touch things now, that's great. What's the next thing? And so far since the iPhone was not new technology, by the way. The iPhone was just repackaged and put into, you know, a slightly better form factor. There hasn't been a big leap, and it's 2003 when they started work. 2007 was the release. It's 8 years, and 8 years we're still using basically the same phone. And there's a very interesting question to ask: that is it because everyone keeps measuring everything that we haven't hit this new level, or we're just not clever enough to hit it yet? So part of technology and part of everything, part of startups, part of entrepreneurship is failure. You're gonna fail. You're gonna fail spectacularly, most likely. And in this case, Flash. It's not that you shouldn't try, it's just, you know, failure is not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing. Failure is just, it's part of the game, right? I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was this technology called Flash. It still exists. It was, especially when I was working at Adobe, it was king of the world, basically. Over 1 billion served. Sort of. We'll get to that in a second. So, you know, the world population's been increasing rapidly, but about 1 billion internet-connected devices were using Flash. So it's about 1/6. It's about 1/6 of the population on Earth in terms of devices that could use Flash. It was everywhere. You saw it on everything: games, advertisements, skip intros, and I'm so sorry about so much of this. YouTube, porn, just beautiful websites, amazing things. And it was everywhere. It was ubiquitous technology. And it's one of those technologies that was there. You either loved it or you hated it, but you had to have it. You had to have the Flash player on your computer, otherwise things just didn't work. And I want to talk just very quickly as an aside that when I say porn, it's really no laughing matter there. There's a very interesting technology theory that says that pornography has actually been one of the single largest drivers of technology. Good or bad, you know, we're not going to, you know, dictate, you know, if it's a good thing or not, but the printing press. The Gutenberg Bible, while very popular, was not as popular as woodcuts of pornography to get more people interested in the printing press. VCRs, digital cameras, first successful e-commerce, pornography, faster bandwidth, internet video, all of this is because there was a huge market, and that's really what ended up driving the technology forward. And there was a joke we had that as long as we had the porn companies, we would always be relevant, and, you know, as weird as that is to say, that, you know, we'd always have growth. And then it all changed. Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, and the entire market basically shit itself. No one, like, people expected that phone technology was going to be important, that it was going to change, that it was going to really revolutionize the way that people interact with content. But we were expecting a much more gradual, slow rollout. I've been in meetings where we talked about, oh yeah, you know, once the market moves and we go past standard phones, you know, like the standard Nokia candy bar phone that everyone had, eventually we'll move past that, we think in the next 5 years maybe, and then this happened, and overnight the market shifted. And it wasn't long after that basically Apple killed Flash, and even porn technology moved away. You could argue that it's actually now a driver for browser-based technologies instead. Product teams at Adobe were killed. Many product teams at Adobe were killed. The products that I were working on, they shrank, they moved people around, but the products reached end of life. They're not really maintained anymore. And to talk about the Illustrator, Illustrator used to output Flash, and now it outputs HTML. All of the people that I used to work with on Flash started working on HTML-based technologies, things that run completely standard in the browser. And as cliched as it is, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. Adobe, who was king for a very long time, had to pivot. They had to change. And this is something that is relevant in every industry, in technology, in design, in art, in everything, that there's no guarantee that you're going to be at the top. And if you're not at the top anymore, you can't keep expecting to ship the same thing and have people want it. You have to pivot. You have to change what you're doing, and you have to adjust, unfortunately. Basically, you move, you pivot, and Microsoft pivots, Adobe pivots, design companies pivot. I have a great example soon about Leica cameras. Have been the most amazing cameras for years and years and years, have had to pivot because of digital. Everyone pivots. So the iPhone happened, and then mobile got huge. And it's 7 years since the iPhone came out. It's been a couple years longer than that since internet-connected phones have been a thing. But mobile's getting huge. I can say this, but it's kind of hard to really conceptualize this, but mobile is giant. So there's going to be a couple boring graphs now, but basically this is charting over time the percentage of the total number of smartphones that people in the US are going to have. That green line is people older than 13. So you're very soon, in the next 3 or 4 years, you're going to have as many smartphones in the United States as there are people over 13. And this is just in the US. When you talk about other emerging markets, China, India, Indonesia, all of these markets, this is how they get online. They get online with their phones. They don't interact with desktop computers. It's all they do is phone, 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 and it's completely changing consumption patterns. Here's another chart from the US. This is from 2013 to 2014. This is the, I think the bottom got cut off a little bit, but this is the amount of time people are spending with their phones versus desktop computers. The pink line at the bottom is the mobile browser. I don't know if you've noticed, but browsing on your phone is still not an amazing experience. The blue line is apps, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the YNET app, Get, whatever you might use. And the line at the top that is just now dropping underneath total mobile apps is desktop. More people are consuming content on their smartphones now than they are on computers. Significantly more. Most content is consumed on something about this size or smaller. And why is this happening? Why are we seeing this near ubiquity? There's this great concept from technology and innovation called diffusion of innovation. Basically, how does technology, and it's not just technology, it's art, it's clothing, it's fashion, really anything. How does it actually get into the market? You're split off into these 5 groups. You have innovators. These are the trendsetters. These are the people that know about the restaurant, the band, the movie, the clothing line before anybody else does. And the second you start to hear about it, they've moved on to the next big thing. Early adopters are the hip friends who know about these things but weren't the first ones there. You might be the one that is in the early majority. You started listening to the band not when the first album came out, but by the second you loved them. Late majority would be your parents. They'll get technology eventually. And the laggards would be grandparents, the older generation, the generation that doesn't take on technology nearly as much. And there's this great chart. It's a bell curve. You'll see bell curves in most population graphs and most things that talk about samples as a whole. And where we are with smartphones and mobile is we're actually in the bottom curve of late majority moving on to laggards. What does that mean? That means that basically everybody has a smartphone. We've hit ubiquity. We've hit the point where every single person, your parents, your grandparents, I was at the bank the other day, and some 80-year-old woman had a smartphone and was putting it on speaker to talk to the clerk. Everybody has a smartphone. And what's amazing about this is that while content consumption, the internet, is huge, so many people are using the internet, apps are even bigger, and social is absolutely gigantic here. There are 1 billion mobile Facebook users. Remember I showed the slide that there were 1 billion people using Flash? That was 1 billion devices with Flash installed. This is 1 billion people who are using mobile Facebook. And 30%, 300 million. That's the only way they interact with Facebook. There are 300 million people out there. The only way they ever see Facebook, the only way they see the links you share, the only way they see content, the only way they see news is on their smartphone. It's a staggering number. And in the US, it's a little lower. In developing markets, it's significantly higher as phones are cheap, internet is cheap, desktops are expensive, laptops are expensive. Why bother? Oh. And our good friends at Google completely just changed the rules of search. Think about this. How do you find anything on the internet? You search, right? You go to your phone, you search for blueberry muffins, as we'll see in a second. And the way it works today is if your site is popular, if people link to your site for blueberry muffins, if it's linked from New York Times, from Haaretz, from all these different places, it'll show up high on the list. If your site doesn't have a mobile-friendly version, if there are any graphic design students in here, if it doesn't have a responsive version, Google's going to ignore it. They're going to heavily penalize it. We're getting to the point where if your site doesn't have a mobile version, it doesn't exist. It is a black hole. And what do I mean mobile version? You'll start seeing results like this for our blueberry muffins. Mobile-friendly will be the first ones that come up. If your site isn't mobile-friendly, doesn't matter, it's a black hole. And mobile-friendly, what do I mean by mobile-friendly? I'm going to pick on a couple people here. One of them is Ira, but she's used to this. She got picked on last year. So I'm going to show you a couple, that mouse doesn't work. I'm going to show you a couple different sites. There's this brilliant Japanese designer whose name I can never pronounce. Tukujin Yoshigayao, whatever, this guy. Something Japanese. He produces amazing visual work. And here's his site. His art pieces, etc. And it's beautiful, it plays sound, it's very Japanese, it's very precise, it's very clean. It's also very slow. It's exceptionally slow. And it works on the browser, it works on laptop screen. I can show it to you from here. But what about mobile? What does it look like if you are on Facebook? If you're one of the 30%, the 300 million people only interacting with Facebook on mobile, and someone shares this site, what's it going to look like? It looks like this. So I can scroll and I can kind of see what's going on. I can't see anything. I can't use it. So what happens? I bounce. When you see a site that doesn't work, you go. You don't think about it. You never go back. So now let's take Aqua Creations, famous Israeli designers. They do beautiful fixtures. They have a very, very, very nice site as well. They're much better. Here's what you see when you go to their mobile site. Big images, it's very easy to use. You can navigate relatively simply. There's still some problems. You can't find the menu here. A couple of the things, but again, if this is shared to you, you're going to consume it. You're going to read it. You're going to go to the site. You're going to find what you need. And now we're going to pick on Ira. So this is Ira's site on the screen. If I go to the mobile version, you have a menu at the top. You can navigate, you can see everything you need, and it just works. If someone shares this site to you, you're going to be able to consume the content. You're going to be able to see this. Is this just going to work? Holy shit, it works. So why am I telling you all this? Why am I telling you about startups, and why am I telling you about mobile, and why am I telling you about Flash? It's because every single person sitting in here who is going to take what they do now and turn it into a business, you're all brands. Every single one of you is a brand. And a brand a new brand is a startup. A new brand is a group of people or a person with an idea, hopefully some money, who believes in what they do and want to turn it into something bigger. And the one thing that I wanted you guys to get, which I'm going to repeat again, is that you have to control these uncontrollables. You have to control the things that you have that you can't actually control. Because again, you come out with lamps. You can't control market forces. You come out with design for any product. You come out with anything you're doing on your own. You can't control if people are going to like it. You can assume, you can hope. But you really have no control over what the market is going to say. But there are a lot of things you can control. So what do brands have? What does every brand have right now? Every brand has a logo. They have a website. They're on Instagram. They're on Twitter. They're on Facebook. They're on Pinterest. Google Plus, not so much anymore. It's thankfully dying. But like, your parents have Instagram, right? It's embarrassing, it's terrible, but they do. Your grandmother is on Facebook. My grandmother was on LinkedIn. She hadn't worked in 20 years, but she was still on LinkedIn. It was really adorable, actually. And I mentioned her last year, so I think it's fitting that I mention her again. And then again, how do we engage? We engage apps. We engage mobile web. We engage on desktop sites. So think about this. Let's look at our Japanese designer friend, whose name I can never pronounce. Let's say he's a design student. Let's say he just graduated. He graduated at the top of his class from, let's say for some reason he transferred here and he went to HIT. And he builds this beautiful site that really shows off all of the work that he does. And he shares it to all of his friends on Facebook. 30 to 40% of those friends are going to see his site and go, dude, I don't know what I'm looking at, and close it. And of those people who are going to then share that site to everybody else, 30 to 40% of them are going to go away. They're going to bounce. They're never going to come back. So let's talk about a couple brands here. This, I know you can't really tell. This is Louis Vuitton's Facebook page, or Instagram page, sorry. Last year when I gave this talk, they had 1.6 million followers. A year later, 4.5 million. That means for each of those 800 posts that they've made, they have a captive audience of about 4.5 million people. That kind of engagement used to cost so much. Used to pay so much for magazines, for advertisements. Instagram is free. You can today create an account for yourself, put some images on there, follow the right people, send your Instagram to the right places, and you get free publicity. People will just look and see what you're doing because they are on Instagram, like all of you are on Instagram. Herman Miller. Herman Miller hasn't grown as much, but it's Twitter. Who the hell would care what Herman Miller has to say on Twitter? But almost 366,000 people care. Last year it was about 300,000. And they've tweeted 11,000 times, and people care. People pay attention. They are engaging with their customers. And granted, it's Herman Miller. They're famous. People know Herman Miller. They care what they have to say. But again, this kind of publicity, you used to have to pay so much for to get that level of notice. Leica, one of my favorites, 376,000 people on Facebook. On their site itself, they get about 400,000 monthly visitors, sometimes a little bit higher. There's probably going to be some overlap. Maybe 40% of that is going to be mobile. But they're getting so much publicity and so much traction. Yeah, I mean, granted, it's Leica. But just by having these properties that are all free, that are all there. So what does this mean for you? This means that your mobile presence is one of the single most important things that you can do. And it's something that you can control. If you don't have a website, you should all have a website. If you don't have a site, or even if you do have a site, you want to build mobile first, desktop second. Ignore the fact that it looks nice on desktop. It'll probably look nice on desktop. The thing is, you probably only have one chance to engage with somebody. Let's say you just come out with a new collection. You email the entire world. You email people in New York, gallery owners, bloggers. You send them the link, they wake up in the morning, they're on their phone, right? First thing you do in the morning, you wake up, you check the news, you check what's going on your phone, you check Facebook, Twitter, etc. Let's say this person is on the subway. They're on the subway, they're flipping through the email, they see the news blast from you, they click on it. It's like the Japanese guy's site. Can't read anything. That person who gets so many emails from people every day is going to delete that email and never give you a second chance. This one chance you have to engage is one of the single most important things that you can do that is controllable by you. And you don't want to let the bounce rate kill you. Fuck's a bounce rate? It's how often someone only sees one page. They come, they look, they don't find what they're looking for, it doesn't function, it doesn't work, they bounce, they go away. They don't give you a second thought. Next time you're surfing the net on your phone, think about this as you are navigating. What do? You search for something, you click on it. How long are you on those pages? 3 seconds, 4 seconds? Sometimes you'll find something that you like and you'll engage. But if each one of those sites that you clicked on was a business, let's say it's a restaurant, right? You're trying to figure out what bar you want to go to. You Google, you can't find it. You Google for something else, you find it, the site is terrible. God forbid it's a flash site. You're not going to go to that bar. You're going to go to the next one that has a site that works on your phone. And you have just seconds to make that impression. So I talked a lot about theory and a lot about why. Like, why do you need a mobile site? Why do you need a mobile presence? Why are you a brand? Why should you control these things that you can control? But now let's talk about how. And some of this, hopefully, you guys have already done, and it's just so stupidly obvious at this point, but open a social account. For you, yes, but if you're about to create a brand, if you have a product that you are going to sell, open a social account everywhere, for every single possible network. If you're going to target Russian market, go on VK. Like, there's so many things, and it's all free, right? Register every single thing you can. Buy your domain, buy your web address. I have davidzukkerman.com. I don't use it for anything, but it's there. If I had a brand, if I were a startup, first thing you do is you register your brand so that people can find you. You should do your name, you should do your brand, and you can create a site. And again, the social accounts, all of them, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, VK, the list goes on and on depending on the market. And link them all. You link them everywhere on your site. You link from Facebook to Instagram, Instagram to Facebook, Facebook to Twitter, Twitter to Instagram to Facebook. It never ends. You link everywhere so people can always find you for this absolute free, stupid, simple publicity. Your domain, obviously, is www.whateveryourname.com. Don't do IL. Don't do COIL. Don't, unless your market is, listen, don't do COIL. Just don't. Like, your market, how many people live in Israel? About 8 million at this point. How many people buy designer goods or are interested in architecture or interested in what you do? Smaller number than the English-speaking audience. Do a .com. And also, do the site in English. You can have Hebrew and English, but do the site in English. If you want people to pay attention to you, if you want your blog to get picked up by journalists in South America, China, New York, anywhere, they'll link to your English blog. Your Hebrew blog, not so much. Do it in English. You can do Hebrew also, but do it in English. It's the language of the internet, unfortunately. Like, Wix has 65 million sites. We don't have a Hebrew version of our site creator. It's as much as we'd like to, we're based here. It's just not important. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. And a site. I know it sounds complicated for the non-UI or UX people in here. Sites sound complicated. There's domains, there's hosting, there's all this shit that you shouldn't have to care about. There are a lot of different companies, Weebly, Squarespace, Moonfruit, Wix, obviously. And I have to do this. I have to do the shameless plug here since I'm here talking to you. But the nice thing about Wix is that we're designers for designers by designers. We employ 80 graphic designers who create beautiful templates, who do the work of designing something for you. You don't need to code, it's free, and we target verticals. So basically, Twitter is free, Facebook is free, Pinterest is free. All of these other properties are free. Domain hosting is mostly free. Worst case, you're paying a couple bucks a month. All of these things are free, and all of these things are controllables, right? Everything that I've been talking about is that you have to control. It's like the least sexy thing to say about innovation and about creativity, is that you have to control it. Because you can't control the innovation, you can't control the creativity. The only thing you can control, literally the only things you can control, are this just very small set of variables. You can control what happens when somebody goes to your site. You can control how you get noticed. You can measure what you do. You can't control if people are going to like what you're doing. But you don't want to be that person who just built the most amazing collection, sends it out to the world, and sees that 80% of the people they send to can't view the site. You don't want to be that person, because it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter how great your ideas are, it doesn't matter what you produce. If no one sees them, if no one can see them, your ideas don't exist, your product doesn't exist. And that's a controllable that you have no excuse not to take advantage of, and not to just, completely make it a second thought. I mean, Louis Vuitton has 4.5 million followers on Instagram. If you get 50, if you get 100, if you make friends with a design journalist on Instagram, you follow them, they follow you, you post something they like, you've just been noticed. It's these tiny, stupid things that are so obvious but kill so many people. So, to kind of close this up, you're a brand. Every single one of you who's going to produce something, you're a brand. You have an idea, you have a product, you're a brand. And you have to think of yourselves as brands, not as students, not as Israelis, not as people on the street, but as actual brands. And brands have media presence. And all the media presence is free at this point. And you really want to learn from others. And we happen to live in a place right now where there are so many entrepreneurs and there are so many building businesses that it doesn't matter that they're in technology. It doesn't matter at all. They're still building something. And people who build are very similar. It doesn't matter what they're building. They're going to have the same problems. How does a startup pay rent? How do they hire people? How do they pay salaries? How do you work a full-time job and then also work for your startup at night? How do you juggle these things? How do you measure success? How do you measure market forces? How do you collaborate? These are all things that just because they're not designers, you can still gain from other people. And also mobile everything and mobile everywhere. Mobile is a juggernaut, it's not going away, and in a couple years we're going to look back on desktop computers, and the people who need to use Photoshop, who are engineers, who are accountants, who are working in offices, will probably for the next couple years still need them, but everybody else is going away. Tablets not as much, but these are changing everything. And remember, control the few things that you can control. So I have one more quick slide before I'm done with this. How many of you are UX or UI people? Any graphic designers in here? UX, anyone who builds websites or knows how to code a little bit? It doesn't matter. Anything really. One of the things I do at Wix is I'm working on a new product. And we're pretty excited about it. And we're going to have a beta in Tel Aviv, like a little hackathon, if you will, the first week of June in the Namal. Free food, free beer, gift cards for people who are participating, Apple products for people who win, laptops, iPads, some other miscellaneous stuff. If anyone is interested, it's for people who are already a little bit tech savvy, people who are maybe building things. If anyone is interested, please take my email address and drop me a line, tell your friends. I love free stuff. I know everyone else loves free stuff, and the opportunity to go somewhere, drink free beer, eat free food, and potentially win things. It's a pretty good deal. So thank you, everybody. I hope that was a little bit interesting, and good luck. Yeah, we tried to do something at Adobe. It failed miserably. Okay, questions? We'll go in order.
I have a question about when you say you are a brand. Isn't it mostly that whoever is using your service or whatever it is, the brand is actually created by people who use it?
In some cases, yes, but okay. So when I say that you're a brand, if you're producing a product, so Wix produces a product, right? We are a brand, right? We have a stupid logo. Everyone, people know us, and then other people use our technology to build their own brands. So when I say you're a brand, in the same way that who makes your backpack, right? Jansport, Gregory, something, right? If you were to produce backpacks, you would be a brand as well. If you're going to produce something, anything, if you're a designer, an artist, an architect, interior designer, industrial designer, you're a brand. Brands are what people see, right? It's the public face. Corporations are, in some cases, have more rights than people in certain markets, the US especially. And they interact like people. What's amazing about brands is that you interact with Herman Miller, right? You tell them, hey, I love your new office furniture. And they respond. And you know that you're actually dealing with some probably intern who's working at Herman Miller who's responding to you. But you're still interacting with the brand. You're not interacting with the intern. They're not interacting with you as the backpack designer. They don't know you exist potentially, but they know your brand does. That's what I mean by brands.
So you talked a lot about how designers sometimes aren't using the digital platform properly, but I've noticed that there's a big problem, especially where startups have a great idea of technology, but they're not using design as like the first priority.
Yes.
Like they're bringing UX designers maybe as freelance, but they're not there along the process. Is it something that you see is changing? Is it going to change?
When I worked at Adobe, actually when I started at Macromedia, before we were acquired, our tagline was "Experience matters." That you have to have great experience, and you look at the iPhone. Why did the iPhone succeed? Because of the experience, because of the UX. And Israeli startups in design world are lagging, significantly behind the US and other markets. I don't know if you've ever gone to an Israeli site. They're terrible. They're awful. The design is bad. The UX is bad. They don't work on mobile. My bank site is embarrassing. Government sites are terrible. Government sites are supposed to be terrible, but even, like REST is awful, right? You see a landing page for a restaurant, and it's amazing that anyone pays money for that service. But it's something that's changing. Like I said, we hire 80 designers full-time. These are not people that we bring as contractors. We have, like on my team, we have 2 UX resources that are full-time, that we consult with on everything. And it's something that's changing. I mean, I would say that if you're in UX, it's about the time where I think every Israeli startup is realizing that it's exceptionally important, especially if you're going to the market outside of Israel. Because again, the market here is small. Right? There's 8 million people. How many of them are actually viable customers of what you do? Especially if you're a startup, very few. Your target is the United States. Your target is Europe. And these US and European companies have great UX. They have great UI. And so a lot of startups here are slowly realizing, and it's a slow process, that if they're going to compete in the global scale, they have to have good UX. They have to. It's not an option anymore. There were other hands.
You talked earlier about knowing the market and maybe testing it.
Yes.
I was wondering, how can you tell the difference between something that is
Sometimes you can't know. You always have to be worried about statistical anomalies. So, if you track something for 3 days, that's garbage. You can't really know. If you track something for 2 months, it might be too long, right? So there's a sweet spot there, and it's just about tuning your data and figuring out. And if you're interested, there's a ton of resources online about A/B testing, about the proper way to do it. But it's the general philosophy of this versus this versus this. Like, let's say you're, designing something, right? You're giving it to a client, right? You're a graphic designer, right? You give, what do you do? Industrial, perfect, okay. So, you even take a poll of your friends, you build something in SolidWorks and you say, this or this, this or this, this or this. It's like it being at the eye doctor, right? Is it blurry, is it better? And you kind of iterate like that. But, the important thing about A/B testing is that you don't do it in isolation. You're not some guy sitting in a room building something, you're getting input, right? And, that's a lot about what you need to do is you need to, because the market is so fickle and it moves so fast, you need input. And you can't be afraid of it. And you can't be afraid to realize, oh shit, I'm building something wrong, and switching.
What is your opinion about Kickstarter and websites?
Kickstarter's a very interesting way to get revenue. People have been building cool things on it. Like interesting products have been getting funded, and you're seeing this crowdfunding phenomenon become a real thing, right? It's not something that's in the fringe anymore. Bands are doing it for their music. Bandcamp is a great example of this. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, like all of these different companies, and it's a great way to tap into what the market wants. And you're seeing distribution no longer be controlled by a couple big companies, but kind of move to distribution through the internet, an idea through the internet. It's a great way to get funding. It's a great way to get money. With anything else, you have then a bunch of very angry people who've given you money that you have to then deal with. The thing with startups is you try not to take too much money from too many people, because then you have to go deal with a bunch of angry people. And the fewer angry people, especially if you're dealing with Israelis, the fewer angry people you have to deal with is generally better.
If you have like a good feedback on Kickstarter and on Instagram, can you rely on Kickstarter the same that you can rely on Instagram?
It depends what you're trying to do. I mean, Instagram can give you an idea that people like what you're doing, but if there's no skin in the game, it's a stupid sports expression from the US. If you don't have skin in the game, if you're not putting money there, it doesn't really matter. There's a funny equation about how to monetize a user. Like, how much is an Instagram user worth? How much is an Instagram follower worth? How much is a Twitter follower worth? And it depends. It's not the same as somebody on Kickstarter who's giving you $5, who's giving you $10, who's giving you $50. You can use Instagram as a great way to say, okay, I posted a picture of a product, I got 30 likes. I posted the next picture, I got 2. But then it also depends who's seeing it. With everything, you want to take in as much data as you can from as many different sources, and try to assemble a picture from it. Anybody else? All right, thank you guys.